Welcome back. I trust you enjoyed your afternoon tea, before that your lunch and your parallel sessions throughout the day. We're rolling through AUSCERT2024, we're paying it forward. One thing I love in a keynote speaker is one who's raring to go. My man Piotr is waiting off my shoulder saying, get off stage, I'm ready to rip. And why wouldn't he be? Because he's the CEO and a trustee at the Shadowserver Foundation. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the foundation, a non-profit organisation with a mission of making the internet a more secure environment, here to take Shadowserver out of the shadows. Please, a big round of applause for Piotr Kijewski. Piotr?
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you very much to AUSCERT for the introduction and the opportunity to speak about Shadowserver. How many of you here have not heard about us at all? Yeah, so quite a bit, I guess. Yeah, so I hope this will be insightful for you. A few words about me. Well, you heard I'm the CEO now of Shadowserver as such, but my background in general comes from the kind of like national cybersecurity area. I helped build up the Polish national CERT, CERT-PL, CERT-Polska, so kind of the ACSC equivalent nowadays. And I've known AUSCERT also for 20 years, since my national CCERT days, and have collaborated since those days up till now. I have a very technical background. I've been a Unix sysadmin for many years. And I've also been involved in a bunch of nonprofits, not just Shadowserver, but also the Honeynet project. So a lot of the stuff I did with honeypots, and honeypots are also an integral part of Shadowserver. I've been the author of many large-scale threat collection and threat sharing systems at the national level, and now at a global level. And well, as a hobby, I like to disrupt botnets and take them down, sinkhole them, and share that information gathered with the community, which fits Shadowserver pretty well as well. So what is the Shadowserver Foundation? It's a 501c3 in the US, so a nonprofit foundation, and also a Dutch stichting. So we are actually two legal entities, one in the US and one in Europe, both entirely non-for-profit. We have a mission of making the internet more secure. We were created like 20 years ago, when basically nobody was really talking about cybersecurity. The whole concept of cyber didn't exist. It was more like information security or internet security as such. And we were created essentially to try to solve the problems of the internet at that time. So we were kind of like one of the first action groups that actually was supposed to take action against certain threats and then mitigate them and share them out with the community. And that's what we've been doing since, going through a long journey of being essentially a very informal organization, volunteer-based, to quite a professional setup, as you'll see, with global impact, or so we hope. Key element here is that we share information, cyber threat intel, at no cost, and we do it globally to everybody all around the planet, entirely for free, regardless of whether you're a Fortune 500 company, university, or a hospital, or a small business. Everybody gets our data for free, and we give essentially information about any vulnerabilities or compromised devices, etc., that you actually see, we actually see on the networks, and hopefully get people to actually act and fix these problems. As I hope you'll see, we seriously punch above our weight. We have quite a lot of unique sources and a lot of unique proven relationships over the last 20 years. And for many years, we were actually quiet in the background, doing our stuff without actually wanting any credit for it. For many years, also funded through a large vendor and at Cisco. But nowadays, we have actually moved on to a different model of funding, and we are also much more open about what we do. On a daily basis, we actually share data with around national bodies, essentially cybersecurity centers or national CERTs responsible for 175 countries worldwide. So these are actually about 140 national governments, but they have like a mandate, many of them, to multiple territories and countries. So essentially we power a lot of the governments around the world with very precise telemetry on what's happening in their countries at given points in time, right? We are, in many cases, the biggest external source of information for governments, and also many other entities like regional CERTs nowadays, sectoral CERTs, etc., but also universities, ISPs, hosting providers, etc. So governments get the data from us for their entire country, but individual network owners, so a hospital that owns a network, or an education provider, an internet service provider, they can also come to us, provide their IP addresses, autonomous system numbers, domain names, and anytime we find a match, we share the data out, right? So this is how we also feed or help AUSCERT protect Australia, and also ACSC the same, providing them data essentially at the national level to redistribute to the community inside a country. We also work pretty closely with law enforcement. This includes the FBI, the Department of Justice, US Secret Service, Europol, National Crime Agency, Dutch High-Tech Crime Units, and many of the leading police organizations worldwide, where we collaborate on essentially analyzing and taking down criminal infrastructure and distributing information about victims to the community. And we are often the go-to partner for such agencies because they know we don't sell the data commercially, we actually distribute it for free. So how do we achieve all of this? We have essentially data and lots of it, right? So we have a lot of like big data sets, and they are truly big data sets. We operate probably some of the largest sinkholing infrastructure around the world. So essentially we collaborate with law enforcement or the domain industry or other industry players to take down malicious domains and essentially redirect traffic to our own infrastructure to understand victims. So we do that for hundreds of malware families. We scan the internet every day. So if you're familiar with services like Short Census, so we're essentially kind of the equivalent, except we scan a bit more intensively and a bit more vulnerability and misconfiguration focused. And we also share that information out there. And we don't just do it for IPv4, we also do it for IPv6. So we actually are able to scan portions of the IPv6 address space that we see being used, and for vulnerabilities or compromised devices as well. We also operate large-scale sensors, so we have like a couple of thousands of honeypots that pretends to be various devices like Fortinet, Cisco, or any VPN or any applications such as Atlassian, Confluence, etc. So we are actually able to see a lot of the attacks against all of these exposed endpoints. And we have this presence in 90 countries worldwide across 1,000 data centers and full software automation to actually handle all of that. We have our own VirusTotal equivalent. We collect malware samples at truly industrial scale with 1 million plus every single day, unique by hash, for a collection of nearly 2 billion in total, which we share with the industry, about 70 different partners. And all of this data, this is like the core, four pillars, but there's actually a lot more, because also like looking into dark markets, these kinds of places, and other kinds of data sets we collect as well, but most of the reporting and everyday activity is actually based over these 4 big data sets. So when we talk about threat intel, we are actually focusing quite a lot on very technical threat intelligence. So these are indications of specific like malware, compromised vulnerabilities, exploitation, etc. We don't really spend time on other forms of threat intel, like more tactical or high-level strategic ones, although we do them from time to time because they are not that easy to automate. Our secret is essentially automation. So we are a huge data gathering and data sharing project that is an entirely automated pipeline. But for specific cases, we do deeper dives into like the real details behind the attack, and then we are less interested in what specific APT group is there, but we are more interested in the actual individuals that are involved so that they can actually be, if not arrested, and at least indicted. Our primary product, which we give away for free, just like about everything else, are called network reports. So these are basically feeds, different types. Now it's like over 120 different types of feeds that are relevant to the issue they're reporting. So they could be reporting about like a malicious infrastructure being hosted somewhere, or a compromised device being hosted somewhere, or a vulnerable device, for example, or an accessible telnet server, which probably shouldn't be accessible nowadays. Each report is tailored in a different way. The format is different to the actual problem it's reporting on. And this is free, so if you don't actually use our services, you could actually come visit our website and provide details about your network. And anytime we collect information that we find that actually matches our filters for your network, we will automatically route you this information. So you basically get a free attack surface checkup, but more like a victim essentially checkup or compromised device checkup, all there for free every single day, happening in an entirely automated manner. Getting all of this stuff done actually requires quite significant resources, and we have these in place, collected over the years, essentially the equivalent of any mid-sized Silicon Valley company. Around 70 server racks with 1,200 machines running 15 petabytes of storage, 4 times 10 gig uplinks. As you can see, these are actual pictures from the current data center we have in place. So we're like a fully professional setup, even though globally we are just 30 people. We try to automate everything, right? So we have like tools, interfaces, APIs that you can use to hook up to our systems to automatically ingest the data into your SIEMs or other Elastic Search, Splunks, or whatever you're actually using to ingest data from the outside. So we try to be as easygoing and seamless as possible with the data. We support a lot of open source tools that enable that, like IntelliMQ, for instance. You can have a look at all of this, checking out our GitHub, which you can all easily find also visiting our page. So we provide the global plumbing for the internet. So essentially, whenever law enforcement or any other national agency or a big vendor, for example, would like to share threat intel about victims on a global scale, they'll come to us and we'll basically redistribute this data to the entire community entirely at no cost. So here in green, you can see more or less the countries where the national governments actually receive our data on a daily basis. Russia used to be green as well, but we actually removed them for a pretty well-known, I guess, reason, which is like the first time we actually went kind of like against the mission of the foundation, where we didn't, where we always gave data to everybody regardless of who they were and where they came from, if it was for their networks. Our coverage by continent in terms of autonomous systems that actually get data from us directly, you can more or less see that, interestingly, Oceania, which powered mostly about Australia and New Zealand, actually has the highest rates of actually autonomous systems getting our data in a direct manner. So a lot of providers or anybody else who has an autonomous system in place. That doesn't necessarily mean that the data is actioned on, but at least it is handed over to in theory, the rightful parties directly if you don't receive it through a national cert. If you don't get this, please sign up. We have around 380 direct report recipients in Australia, so companies, organizations, universities that get data directly from us, so not through AUSCERT, for instance, or ACSC. These are the stats for Australia, 62%, in particular 214 ASNs, but we see also around 3,000 other autonomous systems that could be getting our data direct but aren't. So these are smaller organizations for the most part, but they still make up 38% of the IP space. To give you an idea of what we report for Australia, this is like more or less the scale, about between 4 million to 4.5 million incidents every single day. Not all of them, I mean, these are just events, so some of them are just about exposed services, so not all of them are actually critical. But you can more or less see that, there is a wealth of information going out there, along with, identification of the device makeup, buildup of Australia, all the vulnerabilities, compromised devices, malware infections, etc. So, for example, RDP was mentioned in the last, at the start of the conference today. There are about 20,000 RDP servers that are exposed there, many of them probably just waiting for attackers to log in. But there are also like about 17,000 devices that have like remote code execution vulnerabilities all out there, used by ransomware actors, just waiting, essentially like sitting ducks to be hacked. Our data is very detailed, so in terms of like we provide IP level information with timestamps, but we have also high level statistics, and you can view different countries, different continents from the point of view of our data sets. At our public dashboard, kindly sponsored by the UK government, they helped fund us to actually make it accessible to everyone. And you can look up Australia or other countries and look up all the stats that we actually have on the security issues that can be found essentially anywhere. And that's even down to a state or provincial or regional level as well. So please check that out. There's a whole talk I could do just on that data itself, but that's not what I'll be doing today. I'll just be giving a bigger overview of other things that we actually do, disrupting cybercrime. So we have a whole history of work with law enforcement and also industry disrupting cybercriminals. Back since 2004, covering threats like Conficker in 2008, up till the latest and greatest things like SolarWinds Sunburst. We have tried to professionalize it as much as possible, but chances are that whenever there's a takedown, a disruption of a cyber criminal actor by any larger police organization around the world, we will somehow be involved. If not in the case, analyzing things from the very beginning, then at least at the distribution level where we'll get the data from law enforcement, we will be tasked with actually sending it out to everybody. I said Shadowserver was 2 organizations, but we're actually 3. The third organization is called the Registrar of Last Resort, and that's a registrar we created, which is accredited with ICANN, whose only mission is to register or block domains that have been taken down so that they don't get reused or can be used for victim notification, right? So when there's a big botnet takedown, we use Roller to actually register these domains. And the reason we do this is because the registrar has like special agreements with the entire domain industry to register these domains at reduced cost or at no cost. So it doesn't actually cost us to maintain millions of domains. If we had like a couple of millions of domains, and in some takedowns we have taken down like in 4 days 800,000 domains, and each costs $10, like normally we would typically go bankrupt, right? The idea here is that this registrar actually gets to register these for free, and they can be blocked, nobody gets bankrupt, and the criminals are disrupted. So this is like a big prominent player that you've probably never heard of that actually supports a lot of law enforcement operations. So when you see a lot of like court materials, court cases from Microsoft or other entities, and you can find on page 500 or something, a small mention of that these were actually sinkholed by Roller. For example, not many people may know that we actually control the Sunburst SolarWinds domains when they were actually exposed after the FireEye and other entities where many prominent government entities were hacked. All the domains were actually handed to us. So we had like the best visibility into essentially who was hacked, at what level, which stage, and we could also share it out with the community. We do a lot of work with TrickBot, MOTET, and we are a member of different task forces around the world, including the ransomware task force in the US and in Europe, No More Ransom. So we have done quite a lot of work here behind the scenes for the most prominent TrickBot, most prominent ransomware actors. That includes TrickBot and also stuff that was used to drop TrickBot, MOTET, which was also, we took part in the sinkholing there. We had a good visibility into Hafnium, like if you remember the exchange hacks from 2-3 years back now, that's quite a bit, but we actually also had like telemetry on the actor before they got exposed, and we were already sharing out information immediately as soon as they were exposed. Log4j, we also had very good visibility into Log4j, both on the attacker side and on the vulnerability sides, and we featured quite prominently in sharing out data with the community. We also do a lot of DDoS-related research. For example, recently we helped a university, CISPA in Germany, on their work and their research into discovering new types of DDoS attacks, and then working to try to mitigate them. So that's also something that we have done. Recent engagements with law enforcement cases, MuBot, taken down by the U.S. Justice Department, hacked Ubiquiti devices being used by cyber criminals, but then essentially handed over to intelligence services. So, nowadays everybody's the target of a foreign intelligence agency because everybody's interested in hacking your router or other device for some reason, even if just to hide their tracks. So that's kind of like a big shift in the environment. Quackbot, big disruption in the summer last year. We were also part of that and distributed information from that. And nowadays, in the past we used to hide with our contributions, but nowadays we usually appreciate being mentioned because, as you'll find out, giving away things for free is great, but somebody needs to pay for it, right? And I'll get to that later. It's not just botnets. Various kinds of markets, cyber criminal markets that we assist with. Try to check a platform for card checking for cyber criminals, taken down last year. That was like a pretty big operation, so that had at least for a while, it had a big impact into the cybercrime operations related to stolen credit cards. Recently, just in April, LabHost, phishing as a takedown, phishing as a service platform, operating for a long time, taken down. It really reduced the amount of phishing, at least for a while out there. So nowadays we are also credited, like in this case, by the Met Police, along with other partners who actually helped in these kinds of operations. We don't just share information about threat intel and disrupt cybercrime. We're also involved in a lot of international capacity building efforts to help people understand the threats that are out there and how to better use our data and understand cyber at a national level. So our biggest funder nowadays is the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, responsible for about 50% of our funding. And this is mostly through different funded projects, quite a bunch of different ones in the Indo-Pacific, Africa, Arab Gulf region, or Central and Eastern Europe, where essentially we work with the local community to build a very precise mapping of all the attack surface exposure, all the threats we see coming out of the country and targeting the country, and trying to get the national certs especially, but also the biggest providers to understand the data that we are sharing and actually acting on it, right? So the dashboard, for instance, comes out as part of these efforts. We work with the New Zealand government, CERT New Zealand, on a similar kind of project for Pacific Island states, where we actually also try to help them understand their cybersecurity posture better from the perspective of our data. So we have reports that are being published, and hopefully there'll be another one this year. We run honeypot projects in Latin America together with, originally funded by LACNIC, but now mostly with CEDIA, which is a research agency in Ecuador, to essentially do large-scale deployments of honeypots in Latin America and understand attacks that are coming out there. In the Netherlands, we are working on a project for the Dutch government on building cyber resilience for NGOs, along with some other partners like the Cyberpeace Institute. So that's a project that's just started as well. We also do a lot of research and development projects over the years. A lot of collaboration with academia, especially in Germany, Japan, where we share data about how certain attacks look like and help work together to build honeypots, collect data, and then distribute it to the community. We ever since we started a project with Ren Isaac to build a dedicated honeypot network for them in different universities in the US, but also Canada, Australia, to actually get a better idea of what's attacking academia. And a lot of other secret projects where essentially a lot of the knowledge also comes from the academic sector and enables us to serve the community better. We do large-scale European projects, like these are 5 million, 6 million kind of endeavors. Not all the funding is from us, we're then part of the consortium. But essentially, many of these projects have helped build our capabilities and then have allowed us to serve the community now and hopefully in the future with new data and new insights, such as like, in some cases like scanning and mapping IoT devices, looking at IoT attacks, and even working with AI and machine learning to understand, to differentiate malicious domains in all the data that we actually collect. We are now working with Circle, who has also been presenting here as one of the national certs of Luxembourg on MISP LEA, which is a project where we want to run MISP for law enforcement, so fed also with Shadowserver information, which is much more sensitive than the one we normally share out, where law enforcement can hopefully help use that to deconflict various operations, but also use that in their own investigations. And even though the project is funded by the EU, it's actually also accessible to police forces from outside. So if there's anyone here that's associated with law enforcement in Australia, they're also welcome to join. There is a nice website and instructions on how to sign up and hopefully get additional data. Our honeypot sensor network, thousands of sensors worldwide. Not going to go more into detail here, but we have Australia also covered as well. But we always welcome more sensors. The more sensors, the better telemetry we have. You can see how we track exploitation with our sensors on our public dashboard. You can have a look at essentially every country and see what vulnerabilities we see being used in a specific country using our honeypots. And these honeypots often have pretty good information on what's happening. And much of this is actually also used to feed CISA's known exploited vulnerability catalog, exploit prediction scoring system, which is kind of like one of the standards coming out, or industry standards coming out for folks to better assess whether to patch or prioritize for this vulnerability or the other one based on basically the likelihood of exploitation. So we are one of the 6 primary entities that actually feed data into that. So even if you've never heard of us, but are using EPSS, you're actually also using our data. We have pretty quick response nowadays to latest incidents involving remote code execution, CVEs. This is based on our honeypot, so we have worked pretty closely on many of the recent cases regarding Citrix, Ivanti, Cisco, now Palo Alto, working together with our partners, but also many national certs to see if we can quickly learn where all the vulnerable devices are, how to scan for them, which are compromised, which not, and then share out this information here. So we did quite a lot of work with Citrix about Citrix and CISA and Mandiant last summer to actually have most complete visibility that was possible using the methods that we have access to. And in fact, our work in this space has recently been credited as well from one company that actually specializes in this field. It turns out that we are actually the earliest reporter of exploitation in the wild nowadays of all the known exploited vulnerabilities. So you can see the size here shows more or less the relative sizes. The bubbles show relative sizes behind the organizations that actually report this. And as you can see here, interestingly, we have a bit more than Google or Microsoft. So I think it's quite good for a small nonprofit with 30 people. And if you need better insights, please host a sensor. So I'm going through this very fast, but yeah, not much time. So basically, all of this is all great and fantastic, right? But in the end, we give away things for free, and we get a love from the community, but essentially love doesn't pay the bills. So somebody has to, and that's kind of like our main challenge moving forwards, right? Working in this business model is difficult. As such, for many years, we were funded by one very generous sponsor, which was Cisco. But in 2020, they decided that they couldn't support us anymore. and we have to start fending for ourselves. This was the old Shadowserver logo. Now we have see the new Shadowserver logo. And essentially, we ended up being placed in a very difficult situation where we had to move out of Cisco premises, where we had our main data center at that time, and needed financial support to actually be able to do it, because as soon as funding was pulled, we had basically 3 months of funding to operate. So we made a public plea to actually get funded, and that was like 4 years ago, and essentially even put out the cost at that time of operating Shadowserver as such, essentially asking for $2 million within 2 or 3 months to be able to continue to function. We even had a ticker, 67 days to our data center closure. And we were wondering what's going to happen, if the community is going to rally and appreciate the 15 years of work we already put in into making the internet safer space. And to our delights, we actually did, and we managed to get Craig Newmark essentially the next day, founder of Craigslist, to donate $400,000 so we could actually move the 1,200 servers to another location, which was quite an endeavor. Quite a few trucks are needed to get that done. And then we managed to raise the remaining 2 million or so. Actually, we raised 3 million in the next month, thanks to the rallying of the community. And it was especially challenging due to COVID erupting at exactly the same time and making it very difficult even to move between counties in the US. It was essentially impossible at a certain stage. So we had to move. It was just a 35 minutes drive from San Jose to Oakland, but that turned out to be very, very challenging as such. And we got supported by around 50 organizations that included many national governments, but also private entities, and that included AUSCERT and also from Brisbane, the APNIC Foundation. So this is more or less what we cost nowadays. Around 30 employees, but really 20 are paid. We are no longer a 100% volunteer organization. It turns out to be impossible if you want to actually run projects with deadlines, deliverables, etc. More or less, we cost more or less $5 million a year. So now our challenge is to actually be able to raise this kind of money every single year, right? That's kind of like our open problem that we have, and we always welcome any ideas, solutions. Our funding was mostly government-based, 60%, 35% nonprofits, only 5% private industry is very supportive. In practice, most of the funding comes from the UK FCDO and Craig Newmark, who together account for 70% of our external funding nowadays. To help with our funding, we have launched the Shadowserver Alliance, which may be of interest to anyone who would like to give back and ensure our sustainability, so that we are there to help you. You can have a look at our website. These are the current Alliance members, so that does include AUSCERT, for which we are also very, very grateful, but it's a mix of other organizations as well. And yeah, so if you're really interested in any of our work and want to support us in what we do, to continue doing what we're doing, please consider joining there. We have all the formal partnerships documents in place. So just going to get through that. Challenges. Despite all the positives, there are a lot of barriers to actually operating in this kind of like crazy business model of giving away things for free. In practice, most of the support comes from governments, but it's really very challenging to have the right funding mechanisms. Private industry typically wants business justification that goes against our principles, our nonprofit status, and we quite frequently hear that if what we give away is free, why do I have to be the one paying for it? But the fact that it's free, it doesn't mean that no one's paying for it. It just means somebody else is footing your bill. So I'll just leave some quotes here at the end from many entities that have been supportive of our work in the past. And we are always happy to work with you, the community, in any way possible. Here's, in the words of APNIC, we are the unsung hero that has kept the internet secure for so many years. I hope we can collaborate and continue to collaborate with everyone. If there's anything to take away from this talk, just please subscribe to our data. That's why we exist. And of course, we're always happy to collaborate more in other ways. So thank you. I haven't overrun too much. Thank you very much.
Wonderful stuff, Piotr. Not all heroes wear capes, but some wear, may I say, rocking purple shoes. Look at those wheels, ladies and gentlemen. Great stuff. Give Piotr another round of applause. That was a fascinating insight, mate. Into the plumbing of the internet, Shadowserver.